The divine consistency proof. Walk me through how God proves math is consistent. What does that mean?
Okay. There has been an idea that goes back to ancient theology. And Gödel took it quite seriously. And then I took it seriously because he did. That attributes or properties of things, being a human, whatever, properties are either good or bad, or either positive or negative, a classification of arbitrary attributes into positive and negative. This is very highbrow idea. Now, if you ask me practically, what does this mean, for real actual attributes that people think about who are not abstract philosophers and logicians, it gets a little bit strange. So we won't go quite there. We have this abstract idea that we're going to classify attributes as positive or negative. And there was this idea that God is the unique entity that's in the positive ones and none of the negative ones.
And in all of the positive ones, or just
No,
only?
absolutely all. God is perfect. Now, Gödel took this in a different direction than I took it. He wanted to take this idea and actually prove. He actually proves that it's possibly necessary. So he has some sort of edge that there is a perfect being. He wanted to come up with some abstract philosophical principles that there's got to be something that has all and only the positive properties, and therefore he's proving in some sense that God exists, or he's proving that actually he states a weaker thing, that necessarily it's possible, or some what's called modological hedge.
Yes, please talk about your divine consistency.
This idea of classifying things into positive and negative intrigued me a lot. And there is something in mathematics that is very much like this. It's called an ultrafilter.
Yes.
It's a mathematical thing. Maybe you've heard of this. An ultrafilter on a set is you divide the subsets of the set into the big and the little. And everything is either big or little, and the intersection of two bigs is a big, and so forth. You can guess anything big has got to be infinite. Okay, or at least two elements. There's many ways to say this.
Sure.
And ultrafilters are a kind of useful things in a lot of different kind of mathematics. It was exploited by set theorists. If you have an ultrafilter that has a very strong property, namely, if you have a sequence of biggies, then its intersection is big. And that's not a finite sequence, that's an infinite sequence of biggies. Then the intersection is big. And that it turns out to be independent, whether there is such a thing. And that turns out to be a equivalent, more or less, to some large cardinal called measurable cardinals. So there is something bigger than ZFC there going on if you have a very strong kind of ultrafilter. So I started with this knowledge, right? Now, it turns out that we don't want to consider the ultrafilter. Okay, so there's an ultrafilter of all the big properties, of all the big ensembles, of all the positive and negative, remember. If you take all the positive ensembles, or the positive classes.
Yes.
That forms an ultrafilter. That's what Gödel started with. But if God is in there, it's all sucked up by God, right? So it's just the ultrafilter of all things that contain just this one special point called God. That's not very interesting. That's called a non-principal or trivial ultrafilter. Mathematically, that doesn't get you anywhere. Mathematically, though, you want to consider a situation where you don't have a lump like that. Like God is a lump right in there, right? You don't have a lump. Then I define what an angel is. An angel is a weak form of God. An angel is something which isn't in all the positives. That would be God. But it's in all the explicitly definable positives. In other words, it's a member of all the good properties, the positive sets that you can name, all the nameable ones. See, this is weaker.
Yes.
But that's a pretty good approximation of being a godlike, right? You're only in the good ones that are defined. All the other defined ones you're not in. And I call that an angel.
Yes.
This is just a theory in which you postulate that there is an angel, and you add the standard trappings you would like for a system, some mathematical infrastructure called the choice operator, and you get a system in which you can prove that ZFC is consistent. And the key axiom that drives it is the axiom that angel is, and that there exists at least one angel. Now, this system could be worthless because it could be inconsistent, right? I could just be blowing smoke, right? But I can prove that this system is consistent using a measurable cardinal. And a measurable cardinal is something that the set theorists swear up and down is consistent, is okay, even though they can't prove it. So we've got ZFC proved consistent using angels. And we think that the angels are okay, that logically it's okay to have angels.
I subscribe to The Economist. Their science and their AI coverage is among the best I've found anywhere. And I say that as someone who reads plenty of it. I'll give you some examples. They just ran an analysis on how attitudes towards science are changing in American politics and what this means for research and funding in scientific institutions moving forward. This sort of high-quality reporting is fantastic. They even covered how dark energy may be weakening over time. Now, if that holds up, it completely changes our understanding of the universe's fate. If you watch this channel, those are exactly the kinds of questions that we explore every week. I subscribe to The Economist because their science and their AI reporting regularly surprises me with how deep it goes. And they're also, of course, known for global affairs, both political and economic reporting. They are top tier, and interestingly and flatteringly, Toe is one of the only podcasts that The Economist partners with. So as a listener, you get an exclusive 35% off. That's not a deal that they have just anywhere. Head to economist.com/TOE to subscribe. That's economist.com/TOE for 35% off. Now, speaking of putting on the crazy hat.
Yeah.
So what do your colleagues think when you tell them about this divine consistency, especially with the attributions of the monikers?
Okay, well, one of them said, Friedman, you're just trying to get grant money from the Templeton Foundation, which is known to be very friendly to theology. So that was one reaction. And this was actually from a very credible, known set theorist who should love it, actually, because, this is a set theory. I use all this set theory to do this, right? Some others are actually, I think they think that that this is another reason to ignore me or something. But it's actually a pretty serious thing. It was refereed and accepted. It was actually, they found a referee that, I don't know who he is. It was an obvious strong set theorist. He asked me why don't you go back and prove something better or something? No, I mean, he was being positive about it, but he liked it a lot. So I know that at least one obviously very skilled set theorist kind of bought it, kind of liked it. But they'll like it more. You see, there are all these concepts in theology. Omnipotence, God has all these properties. Omnipresence, omnipotence, unfathomable, whatever, all this stuff. And every one of those, I believe, has a serious set theoretic
analog. Interesting.
Or analog like this. I had the ambition to actually go through all of these properties of God and develop all of these connections with mathematics. But I have, my eyes are bigger than my stomach, So.
Yes. So then, did your math inform your theology, or your theology inform your math, or neither?
Well, this was a specific thing. I went to, speak of the devil, I went to the big famous Templeton meeting. There was a famous Templeton meeting, Congress. I was invited speaker, and there were other ones. Gary Kasparov, the world champion chess player, was there to talk about artificial chess players. Right, but it was basically a foundations of math meeting, and one of the speakers talked about Gödel's ontological argument and song, and but I remember positive and negative properties,
Uh-huh.
and I said, "Oh, wait a minute now. This sounds like ultrafilters, and I think that there's something here of a different kind." So that's how I got into it. But I already knew I had a lot of them. I mean, the math was fully under my belt to do this. I just had to figure out what kind of math would really make this work, and how do I make the axioms. So I had to come up with the notion of angels to make this work.